Global hunger index, you can refer to the video that I've already covered in that application. It is there. Not that important, you will understand everything. So here today in this session I'm going to talk about very important concept, that is purchasing power parity. Okay, so last year also there was a question in prelims, so very important concept. You give a heading, purchasing power parity. Like when we discuss about dollar, okay, $1, we talk about market exchange rate. What is that? 72 rupee. Or we also talk about another exchange rate, that is purchasing power exchange rate, purchasing power parity. That is actually an exchange rate only, let's say 20 rupees, right? So if you remember, sometimes we have discussed before, when we calculate GDP at the market exchange rate, we are at the 5th, and when we calculate it at the purchasing power parity, we are at the 3rd. And if the GDP is calculated at the market exchange rate, US is at the top, and if it is calculated at the purchasing power parity rate, the China is at the top. So here when we talk about purchasing power parity, it is nothing but an exchange rate. Okay, so it is basically nothing but an exchange rate only. So here purchasing power of rupee in India and purchasing power of dollar in US is what we are trying to understand, and we are going to make a comparison. So here it is again based on demand and supply only. So what rupee can buy in India as compared to dollar in US. So that is what purchasing power. Okay, now in simple terms, let's suppose you have $1. Okay, with this $1, what you can buy in US. Okay, let's suppose you can buy X item. These items should be standardized items that should be available everywhere. So to buy this X item, item X, maybe McD burger. Okay, it's a standard item, it is there everywhere. So to buy this in India, how much you need to pay? This is what actually you mean by purchasing power parity exchange rate. So if it is 20, okay, so this is what you mean by $1 equal to 20 rupee according to PPP. But that is not the case actually. In actual practice, $1 is equal to 72. When we talk about 72, it is a market exchange rate. Now why market exchange rate is so high? Because it is again based on demand supply. It is not the real worth of money. It is not giving you the real worth of dollar. See, demand is more means the price will go more. In case of dollar, the demand is always high. Why the demand for dollar is always high? Because dollar is a hard currency and you need to maintain Forex and everything in terms of dollar. So dollar demand is always high. So because dollar demand is always high, the price of dollar in terms of rupee will always go high. So when we talk about $1 equal to 72 rupee, so $1 equal to 72 rupee, it is not the real worth, it is not the real value of dollar. Okay, it is not going to give you the real value of dollar. This is an escalated, it is actually inflated value. Inflation means it is basically because of excessive demand with less supply. So the demand for dollar is so high, so the price of dollar is actually increasing. Or in another way you can say rupee depreciation, right? You have seen already, this is a demand of dollar and this is a supply of dollar. So when the demand is more, the demand, so if this is the normal price, let's say 66, okay, and let's say the demand is increasing for dollar, what will happen? The price will increase, so it becomes 72. So $1 remain $1 itself only, but it increased, market exchange rate increasing just because demand for dollar increased. So that is the reason why I'm saying the market exchange rate will not give you the real worth of dollar. So if you need to know the real worth of dollar, you have to see in US with $1 what you can buy. If you need to buy the same item in India, what you need to pay. For example, like let's say McD burger, you need to pay $2 in case of US. In case of India, 40 rupee. Okay, so basically you can compare this item that you are getting. This shows the real worth of dollar, right? So $2 in case of US, in case of India 40 rupee. So $2 equal to 40 rupee or $1 equal to 20 rupee. So this is your real worth of dollar. Are you able to get me? So this shows the purchasing power parity exchange rate. So purchasing power parity exchange rate will be always less than market exchange rate. The reason, in case of dollar, the reason is market exchange rate is based on demand supply. It will be always high because dollar being a hard currency, the demand for dollar is always high. The price of dollar will go so high. Okay, so price of dollar will be high, and that is the reason why market exchange rate will be high. But when we calculate the purchasing power exchange rate or PPP, it will be low because it shows the real worth of dollar. Okay, so I hope you understood. You can just write one line over there. It is an exchange rate. It is an exchange rate. It is an exchange rate system under which exchange rates of various currencies are determined on the basis of their relative purchasing powers, relative purchasing powers in the respective countries. So here we are comparing it with India and US. Okay, now I'll show you exactly how is it actually going to calculate. Let's talk about some standard items. Okay, let's see the rate in US and we will also see the rate in India. So let's talk about Coke. Okay, and we will also talk about McD burger, because we are not going to talk about any other burger. It can be 10 rupee in India, it may not be the street burger and all those things we will not take. We will only take those items which are normal. Across countries the same item is consumed. Okay, Coke is there, McD burger is there, Samsung phone if you want to, or Apple phone, okay, Samsung mobile, etc. So these three items we can take. Now what is the cost of Coke in India? What is the cost of Coke in US? Let's say $1. Okay, the small 300 ml bottle. Okay, that can $1. So in India it is 30 rupee. So in this context, what you say here? What is the purchasing power? What is the exchange rate in terms of purchasing power parity? $1 equal to 30 rupee. Okay, so here $1 equal to 30 rupee. So is it possible for each and every item we can we calculate for each and every item purchasing power parity exchange rate? No, it is not possible, right? Now can we calculate for all also? That is also not possible. So what we do, we will take a sample, right? So that is why we have taken the sample size. I have taken 3 only here, but normally we take a better sample. So here McD, let's say $2, and in India how much it is? Around 70 rupee, right? So in case of McD burger, what is the exchange rate you get? Here 35, right? $1 is actually equal to $1 is actually equal to 35 rupee. So what about Samsung phone? Let's say this is 1000. Okay, now here in India, what is the S10 price? It is around 60,000, right? So what is the cost now here? $1 equal to 60. See, when you compare different things, different ranges you will get, but ultimately what we are going to take. See, if the problem is if we take any one good, it is not correct, right? And the ideal thing is you have to take everything and you have to take the average. But is that possible? Every item you cannot take, because it is not possible. If you take one item, that will not be giving you correct. Every item if you take, that will give you the correct one if you take the average. So what we will do, we will take the sample, selected items, like we take Coke, okay, we take McD, these are consumed everywhere. So let's suppose when we add these items, let's say we are getting 1 lakh, okay, let's say. So how much it is? 10 lakh, right? So 10 lakh dollar, let's say equal to, or $1 lakh equal to, let's say on the other side, when we add from Indian products, we get 20 lakh, right? So from this what we can imply, $1 equal to rupee 20. So this is how you will understand the purchasing power. So obviously ultimately you are taking the average only, but not all, because it is impossible. We take the sample. Okay, so this is how purchasing power parity, that is nothing but an exchange rate, is calculated. Now how can we conclude? So what is the interpretation here? What $1 can buy in US? If you need to buy the same item, how much you need to pay in India? 20. Okay, so this is actually the real worth of dollar. Then what is the 72 rupee? 72 rupees because of demand and supply of dollar. Dollar price is increasing because the demand is so high. Okay. Now, who's measuring this purchasing power parity index, the exchange rate? It is actually measured by UNICP, United Nations International Comparison Program. Just note down that it can be asked as a prelims question. United Nations International Comparison Program. So I hope you understood how you are going to measure it, right? So the right thing is you have to take all the products in US, all the product in India, you have to take the rates and you have to take the average, but that is not possible. So we take the sample. So that is how you come up with this purchasing power parity. Okay, now what about
Excuse me, sir.
Tell me.
Sir, what does that mean that China is on top according to PPP?
See, let's suppose US economy is 21 trillion. Okay, 21 trillion dollar. So this is 21 trillion dollar, and if you calculate according to market, this is according to market exchange rate. Normally this is in dollar, so we don't want to say market exchange rate. So when we talk about China, I don't know exactly what is their GDP, maybe around 15-16 trillion. It is around 16 trillion. Okay, so this is also in terms of dollar, but this is what we call as market exchange rate. Both are understood in terms of market exchange rate. So actually Chinese GDP, which will be in their currency, right? Let's suppose, now instead of China, let's take India here. Okay, let's suppose India here, and what is let's suppose this is 5 trillion. Let's say this is 5 trillion. Okay, and US is, let's say, 21 trillion. So this 5 trillion dollar, let's suppose this is 5 trillion dollar. How we are actually getting India's GDP? We will take, let's say, 200 lakh crore. Okay, this 200 lakh crore, when we calculate in India, it is in rupee, correct? We get this GDP in rupee when we calculate. Then what we do, for the comparison purpose, we have to convert this into how? We need to convert this into dollar, right? So how will you convert that? You divide by 72, because the exchange rate of dollar is 72. So then you will get GDP at market exchange rate, right? So when you calculate in that way, it will be very, very less. That is the reason why we are coming so down. You got it? When we calculate at this rate, it will be very low only. But when you calculate at this purchasing power, the denominator will be 20. So are you getting me? GDP, if you calculate at market exchange rate, whatever we calculated in rupee in India, you have to divide by 72 to get the market exchange rate. GDP at market exchange rate. But you need to divide by 20 if you need to calculate at the purchasing power. So in which case GDP will be more for India? Tell me, Anjali, which case GDP will be more? Divided by 72 or divided by 20?
20.
20. So are you able to understand now? Divided by 20, it is more, means compared to market exchange rate GDP, purchasing power exchange rate GDP is more, right? So you will be able to overtake two countries which is ahead of you. That is why when you calculated purchasing power, you are at the third position. And in case of China, China will be at the top position because it will be more than 21 trillion. US, let's suppose it is 21 trillion, and China, let's say it is 16 trillion. So okay, the 16 trillion, how they are getting? Chinese GDP in their currency, let's suppose their currency divided by their currency's exchange value, market exchange rate, right? You will have to divide it with market exchange rate. So instead of market exchange rate, you divide with the purchasing power. So Chinese GDP will go more than 21 trillion. But when you divide with market exchange rate, because US dollar price is so high, in case of India itself it is 72, but in case of China, I don't know exactly the exchange rate, but obviously purchasing power and market rate will be different. So here the denominator will be less in case of purchasing power. So the numerator, the result will go to the maximum. It will overtake US in that case. Understood?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So, okay, I will also talk about this market exchange rate. If you have any doubt, you can write market exchange rate. Just write market exchange rate. What is the exact market exchange rate now? You know, $1, $1 equal to around 72, right? Okay. Now, why this price is actually so high? Because rupee is not acceptable abroad, right? So if you are going abroad, or if you need to maintain your forex reserve, for everything you need dollar. So if you need to make payment for imports and everything, you need dollar. So demand for dollar is so high. When the demand for dollar is so high, despite the fact that it is also a hard currency, the demand is so high. So this is how you can show the demand supply curve. This is the demand of dollar. This is the supply of dollar, right? So let's suppose this is the equilibrium position. Okay. Now here we are trying to understand price of one currency, that is dollar, in terms of other currency. So here the price of dollar in terms of rupee, right? Price of dollar in terms of rupee, right? In the y-axis we need to get in terms of rupee. So let's say this was 66. This is 66. Now take the scenario where the demand is increasing. Okay. Let's take now demand is increasing means how the demand will increase. Who are the people who create demand? Importers, right? So importers, they need to make the payment in dollars. So importers will create demand. We have discussed this already before also, right? Correct, no? What about Indian tourist visiting abroad? He need in dollar, right? Indian tourist visiting abroad, he need dollar, so he create demand of dollar. Indian investor, if he is investing in US or any other foreign countries, so Indian investor also create demand. Okay. So similarly, what about foreign investor? When they withdraw, like FIIs, when they withdraw, we call this as, we talk about flight of capital. Correct, no? So foreign investor. So Indian investor case what? When they are investing in the other countries. Foreign investor when they are withdrawing, right? So foreign investor when they withdraw. Okay, so in all these situations, what will happen? Demand for dollar will increase. And supply, do you want me to talk about supply? Supply, who all will create supply of dollar? Firstly, exporters, right? How exporters? Because when you export, you will get the payment in dollar. So you will receive dollar. That means supply of dollar is there. Similarly, foreign tourist. So foreign tourist, when he come to India, he is coming with dollar and he is getting, giving it to RBI and authorized agencies, and he is converting, right? So this market is what actually you call as interbank forex market. So there will be, foreign tourist when they come. Foreign investor. See, foreign investor, we discussed in case of demand also, in supply also. In which context we discussed in demand? Tell me. In which context we discussed in demand? Yeah, when they withdraw, they create demand. But here they are investing. So they bring with dollar, right? So foreign investment. Okay. So foreign remittances also. Foreign remittances, all these will create supply. Okay, so that is how we have drawn this demand supply curve. Okay, so this demand supply curve, so demand created by these group, supply created by those group. Okay, now imagine the situation, the demand is increasing. Demand is increasing means, we have discussed this many times, demand curve shift rightward. That much supply is not there. So what will happen? The price of dollar in terms of rupee will increase. This is what rupee depreciation or dollar appreciation. So here it is not the real worth of dollar. It is only because the demand for dollar is high. And is it a good measurement of GDP? If this is not the real worth of money? No. The purchasing power is actually the good measure because it shows the actual production. Are you getting me? That is why Now there are two levels of understanding: GDP at the market exchange rate and GDP at the purchasing power. For example, when we calculate GDP, let's talk about last month. Our rupee was $1. Let's say last month, okay, $1 is 66 rupee. Okay, now $1 is 72 rupee. Now if you calculate, let's say 200 lakh crore is our GDP in rupee. This is in rupee. So you need to convert to market exchange rate. So if this is in last month, divided by 66, right? If it is in this month, divided by 72. So originally GDP means it's all about the actual production, but it depends on the exchange rate. Can you see the change? Okay, so that is the reason why you are going for purchasing power parity exchange rate. So if you calculate at this, it will be common and it will give you the actual production, real worth of money. Now this will change based on demand supply. Tell me how the purchasing power will change now. What is the possibility that the purchasing power, this exchange rate can be changed? In which situation this will change? Yeah, inflation, right? So now it is 20, it can be 21 or 22, right? Based on inflation. If the prices of those goods in India, if it is increasing, when we calculate like we have taken $1 lakh, right, equal to 20 lakh rupee, right? So I've told you this is $1 equal to 20 rupee. So it can be 21, right? Because of inflation, it can increase to 21. So $1 will become 21 rupee. So this is what actually possible. So this is how the purchasing power exchange rate can change. So the market exchange rate can change based on demand and supply, but the purchasing power exchange rate can change based on the inflation. Now, why there is a huge difference between these two? Because the market exchange rate is based on floating, right? It is only based on demand and supply, and demand is always so high in case of dollar. So the criteria is different in both cases. That is the reason why the huge difference is there. The criteria is different and dollar is a hard currency. So here demand is what matters. The real value will not matter. The real value will not matter. Okay, so for actual transactions, what we use? In case of actual transactions, we use market exchange rate, right? Market exchange rate is what we use for actual transaction, like if you need to pay for import or if you need to get payment in terms of export. For actual transaction, we use market exchange rate. But for comparison, which one is better? Comparing GDP, etc. Which one is better? Per capita income, GDP, this comparison, which one is better? PPP is better. Why PPP is better? Because it shows the real worth, it shows the real production, it shows the real income. So you can actually compare the actual production if it is PPP. You remember when we discussed about HDI, Human Development Index, we use GNI per capita at PPP. You remember I have discussed this. If you have watched that video, GNI per capita is what we are using in case of standard of living, but at purchasing power parity. Similarly, World Bank International Poverty Line. Do you remember this? Also we have discussed. What is that international poverty line? $1.5, huh? $1.5 or 1.5 or 1.75. So this is also at purchasing power parity, right? This is also purchasing power parity. Otherwise, if you see World Bank poverty line, international poverty line, in terms of market exchange rate, suppose it is market exchange rate, how much it will come in case of India? $1.5 means if you calculate at market exchange rate, it will come at how much? It will come around 110 rupee, right, per day. And what is the Rangarajan, what is the Suresh Tendulkar poverty line, 30 rupee, 35 rupee, right? 28 rupee. We have discussed that already. So it is so high. So I have told you there also it is purchasing power parity. So if you calculate at purchasing power parity, it will come close to Suresh Tendulkar. And I have told you, I have justified why, despite the fact that everybody, even the Supreme Court also criticized Suresh Tendulkar committee recommendation, but I have told you, I have justified that it is actually correct. And later even the Niti Aayog also accepted Suresh Tendulkar recommendation, because it is even also close to the international poverty line when you take at purchasing power parity. So IMF, World Bank, etc. when they use PPP only when they are comparing the GDPs. Okay. So otherwise it is based on demand supply. You cannot say anything based on demand supply. The real value you may not get if it is based on demand supply. Have you seen this? Have you heard this concept, water diamond paradox? Have you heard this? Water diamond paradox?